What is up guys, Wraec is here with new video, and as promised we are going to do videos about the transition skills of, well, all heroes that there are. Starting off with Mystic Fairy Freya. Why Mystic Fairy Freya, you ask? Well, in a way I can understand it's a strange point to start this series, well, but the thing is, I upgraded her. And I like to talk about the heroes that I made a little bit of experience with. We probably can't test them all, have to think about some theoretical stuff for the one or the other. But for Mystic Fairy Freya, we got a few tests in, so we can definitely take a look at that. That being said, let's hop into the gallery and let's read her transition skill first, and then we can have our first thoughts about it. So, starting off here, after releasing basic attacks consumes 3 layers of transition power to deal 600% of attack damage to 2 random enemies, and you reduce their damage reduction by 10% for 2 rounds. Cannot release the skill without enough layers of transition power. So what does that mean? Basically, we deal a minor amount of damage to 2 random enemies, which isn't quite a lot, and we reduce their damage reduction by 10%. I guess mostly when you look at this skill, you are looking at the 10% damage reduction that we reduce, because that can be quite major. I'm thinking about Void Boss 1, for example. Void Boss 1 has a buff that gives him 50% damage reduction. Well, with that, you can reduce it a little bit. If you use DGN, you can spread it to other enemies as well, so that is kind of nice. This effect, by the way, a little fun fact on that side, this was indicated in game. You could see where this effect hit the enemy. If that was still the case, I would show it to you, but in the last update I think they deactivated that. Now you can no longer see if the enemy gets the effect. Then again, damage reduction has a buff symbol, and the attribute reduction for damage reduction has a buff symbol as well, so you can see it in the bar above the enemy. But what I mean is really, I can show you that in the video. Yeah, so basically after a few rounds the fights look like this, and this little symbol over all of these heroes that is blinking all the time, that is basically from Mystic Fairy Freya. It was also applied by a few other heroes. Now those effects are no longer really in the game. They removed them. I think they were going to come back at one point, but you can see, yeah, it's a little bit too much, honestly. So that was, yeah, a little bit crazy. So let's hop back into the game. And with that being said, so what do we really have here? We have a decent support effect. That's what this really is. An additional 10% damage reduction on this skill. Not really anything fancy, not really a whole lot. Triggers whenever you do a basic attack with 3 transition power, which also means you have to have 3 transition power and have to do a basic attack. So that is of course a little bit limiting, and we kind of have to talk about the use of Mystic Fairy Freya at this point, because this is something that plays a big role. So if we take a look now at the normal skills of Mystic Fairy Freya, we can just take a look at my Mystic Fairy Freya that currently has all this stuff equipped. Well, the thing most players play her for is really this passive, the passive 2. Every time one of your allies releases a basic attack or an active skill, increases all damage reduction by 12% and attack by 12%, and then the precision by 10%, and additionally a shield. Some nice support, very nice support, very impactful. You will really notice it when the all damage reduction of your heroes is upgraded by 36% at the highest point, so that is very nice indeed. So, and the other thing was really, I think that was like the biggest thing when she was released, was this damage dealt to poison targets, and that she could spread it out to the allies, give them this effect too. And it is a very nice multiplicative effect that enhances your damage by quite a lot. Beyond that, we have a few more support things, but we need an evolutionary factor for that. And how do we gain evolutionary factor? Well, we gain it by doing an active skill. Yeah, evolutionary factor, you can see it here. So that is kind of important. Grant self 1 layer of evolutionary factor. If you check it here, nothing of that sort in the basic attack. So our most impactful passive skill triggers on active skill. So kind of want to have a lot of active skills for this support hero. And also, she's a support hero. That is something that we should also notice. Never was she really used as a main homeowner to deal damage. When I still had my S Mystic Fairy Freya, I used her as a main homeowner for some time. And she was taunted by HHA and then got debuffs and all of that stuff, and she could take that, and that was alright. She never really did the most damage in a fight, rarely ever. Her damage is not the lowest, it's not like insanely low. In most fights, when I have an SQH and her on the field, she does a little better than the SQH. And beyond the 1600% attack damage to all enemies, it's not bad, it's not good. The poison is decent. Mirage Pollen is a nice effect she has. Like, gives the enemy basically a debuff, or it's a skill effect in that sense, that allows your heroes to dodge their attacks, which is very nice. So that being said, we have a support hero here, not a damage dealer. Let's look at her skills and see if that fits her theme. Because that is the thing that, in my opinion, is very important to assessing how good the Destiny transition is. Do the Destiny transition skills either enable a new type of play? So, do we want to push her in a new role with that? Does a support hero become a damage dealer suddenly? It can be the case. Does it enhance her current playstyle as a support hero? As like a hero that enhances our damage in Star Expedition or Flame Shrine? Is that something that works? And then we can take a look at the balance, because every single transition skill has something that we already looked at. It has a point where it triggers. And at this point is when we consume 3 layers of transition power and do a basic attack. So the cheaper this is, the easier to achieve this triggering condition is, the weaker those effects can be and still be meaningful. If this was 15 layers of transition power, we would need very strong effects to make that worth it. With 3 layers of transition power, not that much, some minor buffs, that would be already okay, because we will trigger that like 2/3 of the rounds, which is very nice. After releasing basic attacks, already intrinsically has a problem. And that is, well, you can only do a basics attack if you don't do an active skill. And in a lot of conditions where we use them, a lot of game modes where we use her, we will use her active skill. In Star Expedition, she will do an active skill every single round. This means she will never trigger this. It will just never trigger, because she won't do a basic attack. And then it's the same, honestly, for Flame Shrine. In Flame Shrine, where I use her, she also only does active skills. So everything in here is useless for her. None of those effects that you see here will ever trigger. And that makes this Destiny transition update meaningless in those game modes. So big downside on that part. So where do we do basic skills with the Mystic Fairy Freya? Well, against the Void Boss, most certainly. We don't run an energy feed there, we run a crown, so at one point she will do a basic attack. That is good. That is a new game mode. That is a game mode where we like to use her. So basic attacks there. Quite nice. I already used that. Reducing damage reduction can help do more damage. We already set it. Beyond that, we will see she has some nice buffs, so that can be good as well. It's just not the point where we're currently at, as we kind of don't have that many upgrades from the Destiny transition skill tree yet. This is something that we will have in the future. Beyond that, most certainly PvP. PvP, there we will also do basic attacks. The times where we ran full energy feed, and that was really an advantage, they are kind of over. If you now do that, you really run the risk of getting murdered in 1 or 2 rounds by Doom Terminator Vulcan, which we just don't want. So, now that we've assessed where we want to use her and where it makes sense, is it good for that? Reducing damage reduction? Most certainly. Now let's see which other skills she has, and if that is like the direction that enhances that direction and makes her even better. So, the first skill you will unlock is this one, and it starts off very strong. Additional increases all allies crit by 10%, crit damage by 17%, 2 rounds. Keep in mind, she will attack with a basic attack. This will activate, and when the round ends afterwards, this is your first round. So you will get it for the rest of the rounds on which her skill triggers, and the round after. Can still be good if she's pretty fast. Does her basic attack maybe as the first hero. All other heroes in your team will profit from it for the rest of the round, and then next round all of them. At 10% crit is nice, given that we only need 100% to always crit, so 10% very good. Crit damage by 17%, sure, why not? Not bad at all. Can definitely take that. The other ones, damage. I don't really see damage for her. And then we have this one. This one, I have to say, it is decent. I can see it, especially when we get to the upgraded version of her skill. Extra 50% chance to twine, maybe not like against the Void boss, but I can certainly see it in PvP, maybe even in Void campaign or something like that. If we get Void Vortex enhanced, that would be a point where I can see it. Some CC from her can be very nice. I just noticed I kind of skipped over this one. This is the same for all the heroes, and basically, the stuff never changes that I want to say about it. In my opinion, this one is useless, the last one. When taking damage from active skills or basic attacks, there's an 80% chance to obtain one layer of transition power. Because I tried it a little bit, and from what I saw, it doesn't count as taking damage from active or basic attacks whenever you have a shield. And this makes sense. It's the same, for example, when an Ithaka attacks an enemy with a shield, then this doesn't apply a damage over time effect, because it doesn't count as taking damage. And that is the way shields are described as well. I think we can actually see that on this hero. There, skill effect. Offsets the direct damage and damage over time received. It will disappear when the strength of the shield is 0. Shield strength caps at 100% of the owner's HP. So, offsets the damage. No damage. And this is a problem, and means you will oftentimes have a shield now in the current meta, and especially if you run HHA and, well, Mystic Fairy Freya, and that will mean that you don't really gain transition power. So you are stuck with those two. If you consider that you have to do 2 basic attacks basically to get 100 energy to do 1 active skill, well, then it shouldn't really matter, right? It shouldn't really change anything. But the thing is, I personally run more active skill. And the reason is that getting hit by an enemy will give you energy. 10 for if it's no crit. If you take a critical hit, it's even 20. So you will get fed more active skills, and it will be more transition power that you gain through active skills in that way than it would be through basic skills. I can understand that if you have like a situation where in the enemy team there is something that drains your energy, which we might see on a boss very soon, this one will of course be better in that sense. But personally, I think in general you want to use active skill, especially when we see later on like heroes like SQH that now can feed you energy with their transition skill and stuff. But you want to adjust that. Between those two, though, the last one is just so bad. I cannot see a current situation where you won't want to use it. If you skip HHA and MFF from your team, maybe it can work, but that's not the current meta. So between those two, and then decide depending on the situation and tend towards taking this. So that's good. Okay, we saw the first one. This is great. This is all right for PvP. Middle one, not so much. Next one would be this. Additionally reduces target's attack by 15% for 2 rounds. That is nice. That is nice. Target armor reduction is the same effect, but we often have armor break at 100% or at very high percent. And in that sense also, the new Void bosses, well, they don't really have a lot of armor. We talked about armor damage mitigation in my video about armor. If you didn't see that yet, just search for Wraec armor. You will find it, and it's like all about armor in the thumbnail. And well, they have a pretty high level for the low amount of armor that they have, so their armor damage mitigation isn't very high. So against Void bosses, that isn't that great. In PvP, that isn't great. Target speed reduction, maybe in a speed meta in PvP. Other than that, run this one, that will be good. Can reduce the attack. Like, imagine that just hitting the Void boss with that gets minus 10 damage reduction, gets this attack, and it will be great. So that's a good one. Though I would say, like, from the perspective of node strength, the upgrade to E2 that you need to unlock this is a lot stronger than the upgrade to A3 or A3, A2 for this one, A3 for this one, then the update for A3, because that just doesn't do too much. This is not that great. This is great. Let's look at this one. There we can see now damage. Additionally, it's 3200%. Number of surviving enemies, attack damage to each enemy. Not too bad. Like, it's the second time we see damage. This is, if you have 6 enemies, not too great. It's like, number of surviving enemies, of course, means if you have 6 enemies that are on the battlefield, then it's 3200 divided by 6, and then that is dealt to each enemy. So, yeah, 3200% attack damage overall that is spread between the enemies. 2200% of attack damage to frontline enemies one time is in theory more damage than this first one. Because this can be 2 times 2200, which is 4400 overall. Then again, I don't really see damage. Like, you can try damage if you run a high attack, maybe want some extra damage, be a little bit bursty. Even with supports, I can see that. But in reality, I see this one. Additionally, deals 1800% attack damage to the one enemy with the highest attack. And reduce their all damage dealt by 10% for 2 rounds. I don't see the first part, like, okay, we deal a little bit of damage. But the last part, 10% reduced all damage dealt, hits highest attack. Highest attack in Void Boss fights, for example, is the Void Boss. 2 rounds less, 10% less all damage dealt. That's nice. That's great. We take it. You have the damage options here. I think the first one is preferable, but like in reality, I don't really see it. I don't really see her being a damage dealer. Additionally, this 1200% damage to enemies with Mirage Pollen. It's another damage option, which he has an awful lot of those. You have to say it. It's decent. I would probably rather go for the middle one. As it is again, it fits the buff theme a bit more. All allies damage reduction increase. For Void bosses, I wouldn't go for that. The problem is we have all those buffs from Treasure Train. If you have decent Treasure Train buffs, there are a lot of sources of all damage or damage reduction in the Void campaign buffs, and then you don't really need an extra 20%. So yeah, that's the thing. That in that sense is pretty useless as well, unless maybe in PvP. So maybe run this, I guess. It is alright. There are no really good options here. This is decent in most game modes, but also damage reduction is like it's capped at 75%. So like most of the time, those extra 20% will lift you over the cap. And not running a damage reduction imprint, that will probably leave you very far away from the cap, makes things difficult. Last one, most controversial one, I would rather look at it in this perspective, by the way, because, yeah, this note is a little bit screwed. This is by far the weirdest change that I've seen. So the last node, usually, which is acquired at A6, so we won't see it for a long time, changes up the node a little bit, usually keeps all of the effects of the basic one and then enhances them. Isn't the case here. What actually happens is the following. If self owns 3 or above layers of transition power, inflicts Blossom Erosion on one enemy without Blossom Erosion, and deals 600% attack damage on the target. Afterwards, deals 600% attack damage to targets with Blossom Erosion. So what we see here is we actually lost the part with reduced damage reduction, which was the part that I liked. And we also have a little change here that happens quite often when you upgrade the skill. This says consumes 3 layers of transition power. This one says if self owns 3 layers or above of transition power, meaning for this you just own them, they don't get consumed. For this one, they get consumed. So this is in itself a huge upgrade. Then we have the next part, which is Blossom Erosion. And the sad reality is we have no idea. Like Blossom Erosion, I think it is just a skill effect that is called Blossom Erosion and is more like a marker and doesn't do anything by itself other than like working for skills that target enemies with Blossom Erosion. We don't know that. The Age didn't describe anything with it. We will have to check that in like half a year when we have her at A6. So we inflict Blossom Erosion on one enemy without Blossom Erosion. Deals 600% of attack damage to the target, and afterwards, again, damage to all the targets with Blossom Erosion. Meaning, we will quite often inflict Blossom Erosion. Pretty swiftly we will have that on all of the enemies. And now then we get to the second part of the effect, which is basically if self owns 18 or above layers of transition power, consumes 18 layers of them, and deals extra damage equal to 90% of the max HP to the targets with Blossom Erosion, caps at 5000% of Mystic Fairy Freya attacks. So what we have here is basically a huge nuke. Around turn 6 probably, if you run with active skill stuff. Maybe turn 5, if you go with like a full energy feat, you can get it by turn 3. And in the meantime, you get those Blossom Erosion effects. By the way, if you run an energy feat, the problem that you get is, yeah, well, this is again after releasing a basic attack. So in that sense, you would reach 18 layers, and probably still would only trigger on a basic attack. That is something we'll have to check. If this is also has the condition of releasing a basic attack. But if you release a basic attack after 3 rounds of just doing active skills, well, then you hit nobody because nobody has Blossom Erosion. Which is a little bit funny in that sense. So you kind of want to go there slowly, do a lot of basic attacks so you can activate this a lot, spread Blossom Erosion over all of those enemies and then hit them all with this huge burst. Though, again, we have to say huge burst, really 90% of max HP, certainly good. 5000% of Mystic Fairy Freya attack. It is not a small hit. Let's just say it is not a small hit. But then again, heroes have shields nowadays. So even if those 5000% of attack were 90% of the HP that the enemy has, which by the way is quite unlikely. If she had like 20 million attack, that would be about 1 billion damage. That you will deal with this skill at max, and like if you now look at my heroes, you can take a look. That is a tenant, nearly 2 billion life. That has nearly 2 billion life. That's 1.5 billion life as a tenant, 1.5 billion life as a tenant, 1.8, 2.5 on the LFA, which is not even ascended. Has some ascended tenants, but it's not ascended yet. By the way, only I think it's 7 more hours. Which is great, and then I can ascend it, will be fun. 1.6, 1.67. So you can see that, well, for most of those heroes, that is, by the way, that is the hero card HP. If you go into the fight, that's like 50% more at least, even, sometimes even more. Probably with the current buffs, even more. The last time I really saw in combat HP was when Deathroy still made his hero chart. And yeah, that's a while ago. So in reality, it's not that great of a damage. And the thing I want to argue is, well, you don't really get a proper damage dealer out of her. You get a hero a support hero that deals relatively a lot of damage, but probably still can't keep up with Star Swordsman, Mockman, and all of the buffs you will see there. Or LFA, or heroes like SFX that are specialized for damage and do that very well. You will just get some extra damage out of her. And in my opinion, she's one of those heroes where it's really not worth it to enhance the skill. Oh, we are not in the hero gallery, I just noticed. Where it's not worth it to go to A6. You will be limited on the heroes that can go to A6. It will be a certain limit on there. And for her, in my opinion, she's fine being way lower. She's really fine being way lower. Because I like this reduced damage reduction. This is great. Combat is way nicer to go with DGN. We can get some buffs out of her. I would take this. This would be alright. Can we take anything from here? Yeah, let's take the attack reduction. That's great. From here, I'm like, yeah, reduce all damage dealt is still okay. And here, I already have a hard time finding anything that you want. That I would want. So like, for me, she's like an A4 hero. That's where I would probably see her and would keep her. And to go beyond that feels a little bit like a waste. So, is she a good hero? No, not really. Like I don't really like that skill. It doesn't feel very impactful. It's a very small buff, and overall not very decent. And the only reason I really went for it was like I wanted that reduced damage reduction. I wanted to try that, and it did reasonably well combined with DGN. And I thought it would help a lot to go against the boss. In that sense, well, beyond that, she is a decent addition to a team. That is something that we have to keep in mind. Like, you get this 10% damage reduction. It is a little bit probably over-investment into her. But the thing also that I had to keep in mind is, well, I wanted to go for DGN. Yeah, no core. You guys all know it. We were talking about the core swap event that somehow never happened and probably will never happen, sadly. But like, yeah, I had the core for MFF. And I will need a second origin hero once I enhance LFA to A2, which is another topic for the transition temple and stuff. So I went for her. I really went for her, and that was like, she's in every single one of my teams, and that is probably the thing that goes the most for her. You will get a lot out of her. Is she your first hero that you go for? No. Is she your second? Better not. Is she your third? Also not. Because what I think makes the most sense is you have one damage dealer, which will be my LFA. Keep that in mind. My LFA is my main damage dealer and will be my highest ascendant hero. And then you go for the tenants, which just gives him a lot of stats. Because like, just enhancing the tenants, can take a look at PDE or something. Yeah, that's a lot of stats that you get there. And if you have like run Ferric Investor or something and your tenant is like MFF, that can make sense to enhance her as well. Other than that, I don't think I would have enhanced her if it wasn't for me having her full core, she being in every single one of my teams that I used to fight anything. And her effect was just more decent than the one of HHA, because HHA, yeah, well, the last effect that HHA gains is better, in my opinion, than the one of MFF. The first one is just 600 damage 3 times. Yeah. And then I rather have 10% damage reduction. So overall, not a good hero. Got some decent buffs. You can take her to A4. And she's weird with her active skill. In my opinion, what's the worst about her is they wanted to give her damage, and I have no idea why. Like, she is not the damage dealer. She's never set up in the teams to be a damage dealer, and I don't think they gave her enough damage to reasonably make her one. She has no bypass mechanic like DTV that bypasses all of your defenses. She has no huge burst like a Mockman would, where you just see different numbers there. You'd see 2000% again and again and again, and his last skill is basically second active skill, which is insane. Like double burst, insane. And super insane damage dealer just gets buff that makes him twice as strong. And that's not MFF. MFF just got a little bit more damage. And you will get, if you get 50% more damage out of her, it's still bad damage. That's the problem that she has. I can see her being at one point made just because she is in a lot of teams. When she's no longer in a lot of teams, because there are better options, and I can see some of those heroes being better options, then you wouldn't build her. So overall, I don't want to go with the top 10 stuff. We did that on Barry's account. If you want to check that out, we made a live stream there, and that was quite fine. Recommended? Not really. And keep that in mind. And you know all the reasons now. And with that, I wish you guys a great day, and we'll see us in the next one.